Just when you thought it was safe to take a step outside, the URC has unleashed another surprise on the unsuspecting masses. Let's get into it. Two semi-finals, seemingly two predictable results. Well, perhaps the one more predictable than the other, but as usual, and as it has in every season gone by, those being season 1 and 2, followed up by 3, where once more we have been sensationalized coming into the final. Not just the final round of action where the race for the 8 was hot, where the race for the 4 was all in contention. All 4 of the top sides had a chance of finishing number 1 in round 18 of the league action. A team up to number 11 had the chance of making the quarterfinals of the competition, and, as we've discussed before, that team made it, the Ospreys rising from 11th to 8th and getting into the quarterfinals. You thought there may be some more surprises, but it went according to script in the quarterfinals. All the home teams getting the job done. Therefore, the semi-finals were set up with the Bulls playing at home against the mighty Leinster on the rise again, smarting after that loss in the Champions Cup final, surely with their eyes firmly set on the prize of winning the Vodacom URC for the very first time, or the URC if you prefer. No sponsorship. The URC for the very first time. However, they ran into a stalwart Bulls side, a Bulls side who incidentally did beat them in the knockouts before, keeping them away from the first ever URC final, which I believe they would have been hosting because the Stormers finished second on the log, if I'm not mistaken. The Bulls knocking over Leinster away from home and then coming back to try to take down the Stormers didn't work out that way for the side from Pretoria that time around. But I believe that part of the narrative is far too often lost when speaking about the Bulls and their history in this competition thus far. Jake White leading into the URC, coming out of, well, COVID, really. That's really what scuppered the Bulls' momentum, because since Jake White took over from the Bulls, not too long before 2020, if I'm not mistaken, but they were on a roll, winning everything that was on offer to them, winning the Currie Cup. Super Rugby was closing down at that time. The one thing they won the Currie Cup back-to-back. Anyway, listen, they were on the rise, generally speaking. Not on the rise, they were at the top of the South African game, dominating everybody that was around, beating Western Province Stormers, if you will, on a regular basis. Got to the final of the Rainbow Cup, looked like that trend was continuing, and then lost significantly to Benetton in that Rainbow Cup final. That Rainbow Cup being the bridge over troubled waters between Super Rugby and URC when COVID was still in effect and they were still trying to get past all of the restrictions related to that, so we couldn't have a proper competition, a proper tournament to start off the URC. The Rainbow Cup was there, and Benetton, in a tremendous performance in the only cup that they've ever won, only silverware they've ever won outside of the Italian league in which they used to play, knocked over the Bulls in dramatic fashion in that final, and comprehensive fashion as well. I think it was 38 points to 7 or something crazy like that. A real demolition job by Benetton, who came down to challenge the Bulls in the quarterfinals. So these kind of things that slip into the back of your mind will not have slipped into the back of the memory of Jake White, who he doesn't let those kind of slights go unanswered, shall we say. He's been in the game for years, forever indeed, and he's got the experience to see this over the line. In fact, he will feel that he hasn't done justice to the herd up there in Pretoria, the supporters of the Bulls, who have seen the Bulls, of course, being perennially successful in South African rugby and Super Rugby as well. They went through a period where they were very strong. They weren't always strong in Super Rugby. Let's be clear about that, very clear. It was Victor Matfield, Bucky's Botha, and the boys. Oh my goodness. Farida Priya, how dare I? Just even slow down on that name. One of the finest of all time, if not the finest of all time. Now, Antoine Dupont has come around. That discussion can take place, but Farida Priya was next level. What a scrum off he was. Accuracy. The head that the man had on his shoulders really was inspirational stuff. I mean, the whole team was outstanding, but you had gems like that all over the place. That's what makes an outstanding team, outstanding players. So, getting back onto track now, the Bulls, coming out of that rich tradition, Jake White will have felt that he needs to add some more gems onto the crown of the Bulls. If you look at their trophy cabinet, which they have at the stadium, they have the Super Rugby trophy sitting right there, front and center. Behind that is the tunnel which leads onto the field, above which it is written, Altitude 1,358 meters. It matters. I believe that's it. Or should I say, it matters. So, just to be more on the Bulls vibe. It matters. Now, they are a seriously physical team when they're at their best. Now, this team that they have is a little bit more liquid, a little bit more will of the whip than some of the teams we've seen in the past. Bakkies Botha kind of could be the player around whom you might center the persona of the Bulls if you were to anthropomorphize them. Anthropomorphize, huh? Busting out the big ones today. So that physicality of the Bulls and the Bulls teams gone by, not as much of a feature as this Bulls team. The likes of Ruan Vermaak being the the likes of Cameron Hanekom, a very physical player at the number 8 position, no doubt. But when compared to the likes of PSP, Bakkies Botha, and more, the physical side of the game in Bull sides gone past, more prominent than it is now, and perhaps that's reflected in the fact that the Bulls broke the record for point scoring in the URC this season, broke the record for try scoring in the URC this season, which saw them through to those knockout stages in the 2nd position, which is why they hosted Leinster in that semi-final, and everything would have been potentially different, potentially significantly different, had the Bulls not finished above Leinster. Why did Leinster finish behind the Bulls? Because they came into the final 4 or 5 rounds needing to secure some points from a South African tour. However, on their plate, they also had the Champions Cup semi-finals and finals and potential glory there. So they had to choose on how they were going to split their squads. The way they chose to split their squads was to focus wholeheartedly on the Champions Cup and to send the 2nd-string players down to South Africa. Those 2nd-string players found out what time it is when they lost both of their matches down here, significantly so as well, and then Leinster went back to Ireland and lost to Ulster in the match that really changed the entire complexion of the competition. Now, that allowed for the Bulls to finish just the 1 point clear of Leinster. It was 1 point and not points difference. You see, I've decided to bring no screenshots today. No screenshots. Because we have one match to discuss and one match only. And sensational how we got there. The Bulls, so let's stick to the task here. The Bulls, therefore, were hosting Leinster in Pretoria instead of travelling to Ireland on the back of the fact that Ireland, might as well call them Ireland, some say, on the back of the fact that Leinster had lost those 2 matches in South Africa and lost another one against Ulster, knocked themselves off of their top spot, allowed for Glasgow to temporarily take that spot, and then for Munster to claim the top spot and to end in the top spot after the group stages, meaning that Munster could potentially host the home final at Thomond Park. And what a glorious day that would be. And perhaps that day will still come. We shall see. So, getting back to it now. All right. Drifting far too far from the points. Let me take a sip of instant coffee that seems to have been brewed in such a way as to deliver that unmistakable taste of burnt coffee. You'd feel like it's instant coffee, so they could have chosen a different flavor, particularly an unburnt flavor. That would have been the best flavor. However, in their infinite wisdom, they chose to go down a different path. And they have delivered a product into stores which has that nostalgic, reminiscent taste of coffee on the road. When you think it's going to be good, you look in the shop and they have a whole coffee machine there. They've got steamers going on. The noises are being made, but the smells aren't necessarily being smelt, and that's what you really need to focus on. Okay, drifting away, but let's get back to the point. So the Bulls at Loftus Versfeld, Fortress Loftus, as it can very much be called again now. They've turned it back into their fortress. In domestic matches as well, significantly this season, beating the Stormers for the first time in some time. I think they were on a string of 7 losses against the Stormers, and that is sacrilegious in this country, especially to the Bulls fan. To all the other fans, like, wow, that's a lot of matches in a row. To the Bulls fan, it'll be burning real deep. So, Jake White gets the Bulls back on track in this season. So, sorry, let me recombobulate myself here. Jake White gets the Bulls back on track this season. 2024-24 season, URC Season 3. After the first two seasons where people were saying, nah, the Bulls are desperately underperforming, got knocked out early in the playoffs last season, got knocked out, if you want to call it that, in the final of the first season after pulling tremendous work to actually make it to that final. And just a side note as well, the South African protocols on player rest so that the players can be ready for Currie Cup action which follows on after the URC season. It seems that Jake White has managed that to perfection. The likes of Sergio Peterson, who have been not featuring for the Bulls side for many weeks, has actually been on that 8-week rest protocol that is stipulated by my players, the player management company, if you will, in this country, the group of people looking after the the welfare of our South African players. And the discussions between the two parties, between my players and the various franchises, there's a lot of he said this and she said that. There's probably more of he said this and he said that going on up top, but plenty of female representation in the management of these rugby sides. Make no doubt about that. So, in the end, the Bulls players are actually ready to take on the Currie Cup with no restrictions. Players not going to have to be juggling as much as the other side. It's going to be interesting in the Currie Cup to see how much everybody does need to juggle these players and who's going to be featuring for what teams. And will the Bulls be dominant because of what Jake White's done in preparation for this? Regardless, back to the game. Game hasn't even started yet, really, in the recap that I'm currently doing. So, Loftus-Versfeld turns out to be the venue because of Leinster's actions. They could have been top of the log, could have been hosting all the way to the final, and you have to feel if they were doing that this season that they would be very focused on not having the same slip-up that they had in URC Season 1 when the Bulls travelled up to Leinster and beat them at home. So Leinster squandering the opportunity to be the hosts, and as a result, they found themselves away from home in a very, very difficult circumstance for any side in Loftus-Versfeld, travelling down to face the mighty Bulls. They were well prepared. Their team was class. What a match it turned out to be. I wasn't working this weekend in commentary, so for the first time in some time, I was able to just take in a rugby match in its entirety, from the first minute to the 80th. And I've got to tell you, it's an entertaining sport. What a match that was. Brutality from the first minute to the last. Such clinical execution as well. Both teams looking so good. Ambrose Papiers having a watershed season, the number 9 for the Bulls. He has 7, 9, 15 Springbok caps, that kind of number, to his name. And those caps were earned some time ago. Now, that's the problem with Ambrose Papier. Came out, breakout star, made the Springbok squad, won those caps, and then disappeared somewhat on the South African scene for a number of years. Spent one short season in Sale Sharks. I'm not even sure it was a full season, but got about 9 caps for Sale Sharks. Regardless of anything else that's happening, he's back in his homeland now, spending more than 10 years at the Bulls and finally playing his best rugby again. And he's heading into the final, starting scrum off. He must be extremely excited. Also because he knows that Paul de Vet is coming up from the Stormers at the end of the season. He's going to be a Bull next season, just after Ambrose Papier has signed for a further 3 years, I believe, with the Bulls. So there's going to be competition galore going on in Pretoria. And Keegan Johannes, who's sitting behind Ambrose Papier as it stands, will be shaking in his boots. And he has said that he's also training on his number 10 skills so he can be more versatile for the side and offer that option. Very interesting what lies in the future of Keegan Johannes. So, back to the game. Injuries continue to blight the Bulls. Now, if there's one thing that might really derail what's starting to look like a march towards the URC title, it may be the players that are missing for the Bulls. But that being said, the 2 World Cup winning wins. World Cup winning wins. That's what I've got for you. The 2 World Cup winning wings who were expected to have such an impact for the Bulls in these knockout stages. Keenan Moody and Kurtley Arendse both came into the semi-final unavailable, hospitalized not too long ago. Kurtley Arendse getting a cheekbone fracture, I believe it was, and Keenan Moody having injured his index finger and having to have a minor surgery on that as well. He still remains unavailable. Don't think he's going to be there for the final either. Kurtley Arendse definitely not going to be there for the final. Willie le Roux compromised in this match on the back of a late hit. A lot of talk about the refereeing in this match, and I'm going to go ahead and walk away from all of that talk. Late hit on Willie le Roux, which resulted in him now being injured and missing out, I believe, on the final. or they were sweating on his fitness. Now you see, the screenshots would have helped with that. That I should have checked up on. Regardless, whether or not Villiers playing, a plan will have to be made. And if Villiers not playing, that's going to be a big one. Each one of the losses that they have suffered, are big ones. Marcel Coetzee, for example, has been massive, and he's been missing for many weeks. Marco van Staden returning to the team was absolutely huge because the loose trio of the Bulls was absolutely obliterating fools out there. Massive tackle from Elrich Lowe and Cameron Hanekom turned out to be the turning point of the game. Driving through the point of contact thereafter, Hanekom picking up, moving forward, and then eventually Nizam Carr clearing the lines with the boot. Nizam Carr stepping up. What a signing he has been for Jake White. Predictable indeed, because that guy's always been dependable since his earliest days. Always had a steady head on the shoulders, Nizam Carr, when he was playing for the Stormers before he headed over to the Worcester Warriors, the Wasps. There's a W in there, and it's in England, the Worcester Warriors. Which one's the one that cooked out? Because that's the one he went to. In the end, coming back to the Bulls, and what a stalwart he's been for the Bulls yet again. Now, heading into the final, he's going to be a crucial cog. Having Johan Goosen back, absolutely massive these last few weeks. After that suspension that he got in the Munster match, which perhaps took away the Bulls' chance to finish top of the log when they lost to Munster at home. Goosen getting that late red card. Was it late? Final couple of minutes. Anyway, it had a big effect on the end of the match. It was late. And Munster capitalizing on that opportunity, securing victory and putting themselves on the top of the log in prime position to host the final. But alas. So, the Bulls getting the job done with a tremendously physical and clinical performance that somewhat belies some of the other games that they've played throughout the season, but they know when to hold them and they know when to fold them. So they've been playing some running rugby throughout the season, which has racked up that record-breaking try tally, averaging 5 tries a match actually throughout the season, the Bulls. And what a performance that is from a side that's usually known for its more conservative play and known for really grinding out victories. They've changed their style altogether to complement this competition. Because, of course, there are those games when you go overseas and you play the European sides that you cannot afford to play conservative rugby if something else is coming down the track at you. So if 2-3 tries are scored early in the match, you have to have the capacity to absorb that pressure and understand that you're going to have the energy to fight back later in the half when the other side will be fatigued. Very much the case at Loftus Versfeld when the Bulls welcome teams there, especially in the summer here in South Africa, and the European sides are coming from colder weather, and the Bulls can put the pace on the sides, and if they time the match to perfection and the other side is not managing to slow down the play, you can put 2, 3, 4 tries there in the first half, take the match away from your opposition, and then even if you are fatiguing towards the end of the match and they've planned to bring on their substitutes, they've got those players that are going to lift their performance, they change their style and they score a couple of tries that can only make the scoreline more respectable but can never track you down. Perhaps the perfect microcosm of this dynamic could be seen in the Bulls against Benetton when the Bulls scored 58 points in the match and Benetton scored 3 or 4 tries late on and ended up with 32 points for themselves or something like that. So it ended up being an 80-90 point match, but at no point were the Bulls actually under threat because they'd stacked up enough of that lead. Now, Glasgow will be very aware of this, but before we get there, let's just wrap things up. Jake White getting the job done. Leinster deeply disappointed. It's been a couple of rough seasons for them, because they, of course, have been dominant in URC rugby and Pro 14 rugby and Pro 12 rugby going back, and Celtic League rugby as well coming out of there. Leinster have been building their dominance for some time, and they have a monopoly on most of the Irish players in their side, so they'd be hoping to succeed before the consequential tour of Ireland to South Africa coming up just next month. But more so for themselves, for their own franchise, for the fans who have been watching success after success and really must have a bitter taste in their mouth after yet another season has been derailed, this time at the hands of the Bulls. But great success for the Bulls. Great success for the tournament. Let's be clear about that. Not sure what the odds were saying before the match, but sure people must have been giving Leinster a decent chance in spite of the fact that the Bulls were playing at home. The Bulls getting the job done eventually by 5 points in the end. It really was a tight match, and Johan Goosen perhaps proving the difference, his accuracy, his calmness, and also his ability to accelerate the match, as we saw in the quarterfinal as well when he broke it open against Benetton in a match which at times looked like it was slipping through the fingers of the Bulls because Benetton were able to control the pace of the match so much better than they were in their previous visit about 2 weeks before. I think it was round 17 when the Benetton came down to Bulls land and lost significantly after having beaten the Sharks in a massive victory, which really was the difference in seeing them through to the quarterfinal stage. And thereafter, they had a do-or-die match against Edinburgh at home. So the knockout stages of this tournament actually start before the quarterfinals if you keep your eyes peeled, because there are many sides that absolutely have to win in order to keep themselves in the hunt. And then, of course, you think, well, you're just keeping yourself in the hunt. Really, what are you doing for the competition? Is it going to be of any consequence in the end? And then a side like Glasgow, a side who slipped down from first to fourth and were looking to be past their best form, go and play away against Munster in semi-final number 2 and achieve sweet, sweet victory. What a match that turned out to be. I didn't get to watch it because I was trying to watch on my phone, the app that I was trying to watch on, an official app, by the way. It's not a hijacked stream. None of that nonsense. Paid for business. The app wasn't working out for me. I'm sharing it with a couple of other friends and family members, and viewing was restricted because somebody else was on the stream, and I didn't want to, monopolize the stream for the entire day. So I had to keep up with text alerts, and I was alerted at all times, wondering what kind of match I was missing out on. Also, spending time with the girlfriend, you got to have balance to your life. Rugby is there. People are there too. Cherish them. So that match turned out to be a real arm wrestle. Having watched highlights since, the Glasgow Warriors, they really, when they play well, they are such a cohesive unit. Especially so the South African exports. Kyle Steyn scoring the try when he picked up a loose ball for Munster, who appeared to be dominating, and got a Glasgow player a yellow card due to the pressure they were putting on the Glasgow line early on in the match. But Kyle Steyn picking up the ball and running straight down the field under the sticks. Former 7-star, of course, so he knows what to do with those kind of opportunities. Was never going to be caught after he picked that ball up. Tremendously fit, tremendously composed player. What a leader he is as well. And so glad for him that he's having great success in this tournament. Aside, of course, coached by a proud South African, a Springbok indeed, in Franco Smith, who's also been a part of the Springbok coaching staff and is going to be a part of the Scottish coaching staff going forward. Much luck to him there. And, of course, they have the likes of Henku Venter in the ranks as well, who's been playing extremely well. A player used to play for the Cheetahs, played in Pro 14, and must have his head in the clouds thinking, I'm going to a URC final. What a turn-up for the books this is. Tremendous stuff for a side from Scotland to go away against Munster, who have been tremendous this season. Top of the log Munster. Munster, who snatched the top spot away from Glasgow that they briefly held on to before coming into round 16, I believe. And then Munster had put in some good performances, snatched that lead right back and held on to it all the way to the end. As a result, apparently, they put up a poster advertising the final of the URC to be hosted at Thomond Park. Glasgow Warriors arrived at the stadium and saw that poster, and Franco Smith, unsurprisingly, used that as motivation. You got to have some cohesion between the marketing and the execution side of the business. Or maybe everybody was cool with that. Maybe everybody did feel that they were going to beat Glasgow in that semi-final and march on in to the grand finale. But alas, that's not the way it went down. Oh, man. Love this game. Love the way this competition can serve up these kind of results in the knockout stages as well. You'd have to say the one issue is if we could have all of the teams playing full strength at all times, you would have far more of these kind of results throughout the season, which would throw the log into jeopardy for longer periods of time. On the other hand, if Leinster were playing full strength all of the time, what would that mean for the competition? Thoughts for your day. So, the second try by Glasgow, scored just after the 50th minute. The injection of pace from Hugh Jones, schooled right here in South Africa and played very well for the Stormers for some time as well. Has such a tremendous turn of pace, does Hugh Jones. Extremely balanced runner as well. So while he's in that half gap asking the question of you pumping the legs, you clearly desperately holding on to stay in the contest, diving to hold on to his jersey. He's got the ball in both hands, head up, on a swivel, eyes looking left and right, and he hit his man on the money, Cancelier, who streaked away from Zebo to get in over the line in the try that made the difference in the match. Munster, my goodness, they must be hurting after that one. The fans went silent. Absolutely fell into silence, that stadium. Thomond Park was rocking up until then. At half-time, they were booing, they were baying for blood. There was a fight going on. The yellow card was issued to Glasgow. Really fought against the odds that Glasgow to get through to this. So impressed with them. Sione Tuipulotu. I think I mispronounced that both times. Should I go again? Tuipulotu. That's more of the kind of way I heard it pronounced when, those kind of surnames popped up in Super Rugby. Tuipulotu. What a player. So, the point being, that number 12, when he plays on the front foot, he is absolutely brilliant. Saw him playing against the Lions a few weeks ago. And Jordan Hendrickse, who incidentally is going to be starting for the Springboks against Wales this weekend in a match that precedes the international window and will take place just before the final of the URC at Twickenham in London, followed up by, I think it's a match between the Barbarians and Fiji. An absolute festival of rugby out there at Twickenham. If you're a rugby lover, you live near Twickenham, you get a lot of treats in your life. And of course, the Sharks played at the Stoop a few weeks back in their semi-final against Claremont. It's all happening out there. And then, of course, the final of the competition was at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. So, London rugby fans, as usual, getting a feast of rugby for their eyes. And, of course, the South African side proper will be taking to the field in July against Ireland in a 2-match test series, followed by a match against Portugal in the first ever meeting between those two sides at test match level, or at any level, I presume. Maybe there's been sevens match between the two. So I stick by my point. And totally drifted away from what I was talking about there. Oh, what an absolute disgrace. What a disgrace. Oh, Jordan Hendrickse, that's where we were. Jordan Hendrickse was playing against Sione Tuipulotu. There'd been a change before the match because Marius Lowe had been injured for the Bulls, necessitating a shift from the Bulls for somebody to fill in the number 12 jersey. Hendrickse went to 12. Gianni Lombard went to 10, and they had Van den Berg playing at 9. Initial thoughts, not just me, but amongst the crew as well, were, is Jordan Hendrickse going to be able to match up to the physicality that Sione Tuipulotu is going to bring? Because when Tuipulotu runs at the line, he causes problems for the best of defenders. I was unaware of the battle stats of Jordan Hendrickse at that time. Since then, I have been alerted to them, and the man makes tackles. He makes tackles galore, one of the highest tackle rates of those halfbacks available to the Springboks in this international window. A really strong defender. Never mind the defense, the way that he went in on attack. Jordan Hendrickse was taking it to Tuipulotu for the entire match on defense and attack. He was running at the line, he was running at the number 12 and whoever was in front of him, opposition-wise, but he was playing that crash ball center role that Marius Lowe usually fills, and he was playing it fearlessly, making all of his tackles as well. And Tuipulotu, probably system-based, so systematically speaking, he was sending one out the back and keeping those backline moves working where the fly-off loops around and occupies the second backline, as opposed to using him as the battering ram to poke holes in that defensive line of the Lions and then perhaps do what they were doing on the second and third phases. So, was wondering what the plan was with Tuipulotu and why he wasn't playing like that, and great to see him thriving now, and was deeply involved in a tremendous try in the previous round as well. Just a dangerous player, and the Bulls are going to have to watch out for him for sure. But there are many players all across the park they'll have to watch for. Johnny Matthews, is he not the top try scorer playing for Glasgow as well? Aka van der Merwe on the other side, prolific try scorer, playing at hooker for the Bulls, coming off the bench. Came off the bench in the semi-final. And a couple of penalties went against Mr. van der Merwe. And you could see that a sense of distress was writ large across the good man's face, and for good reason. Things were looking shaky. So, between Grobelaar and Van der Merwe, they're going to have to keep Matthews and the like under control. Glasgow Warriors, high-quality outfit, coached by Franco Smith. Wish all the best for him. But as a South African fan, really got to hope that the Bulls can be victorious this time around in the third final of the URC. All three of the finals being hosted in the sweet land of South Africa. What a tremendous introduction to this competition we have had for the South African sides who are yet to become full members. We are growing higher and higher. That much is for sure. So one match remains. Only one match remains, and that is the final of the Vodacom URC. I know I said last week that it wasn't going to be hosted at Loftus if the Bulls managed to get into the final. And at that time, I really didn't think the Bulls were going to be hosting the final, but so they are. And it turns out that Loftus Versfeld is available, so they're not traveling down to Orlando Stadium in Soweto. They won't be going to what was previously known as Soccer City. Very attractive, alliterative, bouncy name. It just springs off of your tongue and out into the world. And now it has the name of a sponsor, as is the plight of basically every stadium these days, and it's a heartbreaking tale. So the previous two finals were hosted at, shall we call it, Greenpoint Stadium. And this one will be hosted at Loftus Versfeld, which is also a sponsored stadium. I'm just leaving the sponsor out. And of course, the Greenpoint Stadium is called something different altogether. So, let's get off of that point. Bulls hosting Munster. No, excuse me. Incorrecto. The Bulls hosting Glasgow Warriors in the final of the URC. What a turn up for the books. This is going to be tremendous. And the Glasgow Warriors have nothing to lose and a lot of expansive, high-quality players. Hugh Jones was missing for a long time this season. So to see Tuipulotu and Jones next to each other in the centre is very, very exciting prospect indeed. They have some experience in their ranks as well, the likes of Weir, Horn knocking over the kicks from them from number 9, another steady head as well. But can their forwards match up to the brutality of the Bulls in spite of not being the biggest and most bruising pack in Bulls history, and in spite of play intentionally going away from the pack? By design, one presumes that Jake White has built the squad in this way to have the more rangy loose forwards, to have locks that can run around the field, make tackles, be involved in the play as well. If you watch the Bulls match as well, Eldrich Low being used as a high ball chasing winger, kicking across field, Goosen and the like, and Eldrich Low waiting out there on the left or the right wing and challenging those wings of the opposition of Leinster, and challenging very successfully. More so not on James Lowe's side, of course, and that proved to be extremely fruitful indeed, and he's a real problem, Eldrich Low, on the ground. But once he takes to the skies, and you know he's going to clatter into you as he challenges for the high balls, oh, you got problems. And I mean, the high ball as a feature in rugby. To the youngsters out there, rugby didn't used to be a game centered around the Gary Owen. The Gary Owen was a feature that, was named after a certain individual who was excellent at the Gary Owen. And since then, the high hanging up and under has become more of a prominent feature in the game, but not for many years. It was allowed to lie fallow for a long time. People were playing the ball through their hands, kicking for the corners, tactical kicks. And then it became the main thing in rugby, and the main thing it remains right now. So as a number 9, if you can't hit the accuracy on those box kicks being the ones that you pick up from the base of the ruck and you kick over looking to land them in a box, proverbially speaking. I say that because a listener, if you can imagine that, you're not alone out there. There are other listeners. A listener suggested to me that I should actually have an explainer on what is the URC. And that makes a lot of sense, actually, as a person who is actively watching the tournament for the third season, for the third season, and still trying to get a handle on the entire competition. I don't know if you can hear my dog having a little snore over there. Took the kid on a light jug this morning. It's hit him hard, which probably says more about me than him, because why is it that the light jug was so effective? It's because there have not been that many light jugs to my shame. So, completely drifted away from what I was talking about there. Oh, number 9s. The modern number 9. And that point leading to Ambrose Papier, who I was saying earlier has had this watershed season, is playing so well. Now, the problem against Benetton and in other games this season is that he doesn't consistently land the ball in that box, in that proverbial box that we were talking about. And if you cannot do that, you're not going to be playing at the highest level. It's quite simple. For any nation at all, that's a requirement these days, to hang it up and let it drop right there on the touchline. Jamison Gibson Park, by the way, the New Zealand-born, who is now an Irish legend at number 9. He's brilliant for Ireland at number 9. The way that he can put a ball on a penny sitting on that touchline just compromises everything that you're trying to do. You have to take the ball into touch if you want to be safe. If you're trying to keep the ball in play and win back possession for your side, you're going to be doing so under compromised circumstances. Catching it in the air with pressure coming, with your own players retreating, catching it down by your knees because you're trying to make sure that you catch the ball and land in field. You've got so many things going on in your mind besides the savages who are looking to come and take your soul. And once you stop thinking about that, that's when you find out very quickly that life can turn in an instant on a rugby field. Oh, man. What a game. Enjoyed every minute of that match. High-intensity rugby is everything that this competition should be, the kind of rugby that South African sides should be playing. South African sides filled with good quality South African players. Although many of our players are still playing in foreign lands and overseas, more and more are coming back to the homelands, and we're seeing strong South African sides take it to these European sides, and it makes sense for South Africans to stay in South Africa now. So much as Johnny May said when the Sharks knocked over Gloucester in the, was it? Yeah. Gloucester it was. Gloucester, it was Gloucester. Just as Johnny May said about the South African packs, like, it's unfair. It's basically a South African pack we were playing against when they were playing against the Sharks, a South African team that had 4 Springboks playing in the pack out of the 8. 4, well, these 4 World Cup winning Springboks, isn't it? 4 Springboks overall, because it was Koch, Bongi, Ox, Eben. Thereafter it was Gerbrandt, if I'm not mistaken. Pepsi Buthelezi playing at 8. He doesn't have a South African cap to his name, I don't believe. Under 20 captain, of course, and he'll be hoping that he has a chance. However, the fact that he's not included in the match against Wales at Twickenham would indicate that he might not be a part of this coming cycle of South African rugby either, which does not bode well for the man playing number 8. And then on... wow. Excuse me. Then on the flanks with the James Fenter. I don't know why I'm going through this entire team. The point is, a South African side should have a South African pack. A South African side should have a South African pack. Simple as that. And we look forward to those days coming back. The Stormers, in their first season, the likes of Steven Kitsoff, Frans Malherbe, absolutely pivotal to victory. And of course, Dion Fourie, who turned out to be a Springbok himself. Who knew at that point that Dion Fourie was going to be the captain of the Springboks by the end of the match when they won their 2nd World Cup in a row, the 4th overall. Record, people. And bear in mind, we missed 2 World Cups, and we've won the most. So, to any foreign ears listening to this, put some respect on our name. Put some respect on our name. The Springboks will be back in action this weekend. Don't even have time to talk about that right now. We'll do a review of that next week. I am actually personally going to be doing some commentary on that match, not from Twickenham, unfortunately, but from a studio in Johannesburg. What a privilege, what an honor it shall be. A lot of new faces on display for the Springbok side. Saw that Eben Etzebeth has more test caps than the entire Welsh scrum, which doesn't bode well for the Dragons of Wales. However, many new faces in the South African side. Will they be cohesive? What kind of match are we going to see? Does Wales have a chance to pull a big upset on the reigning, defending champions of world rugby, the Springboks? We shall see. Enjoy the entire weekend of rugby. The Super Rugby final is also happening on Saturday morning, 9:05 South African time. And, wow. Little burps. Mistimed. Okay, so the final of Super Rugby is happening on Saturday morning at 9:05 South African time. Bulls taking on Bulls. The bloody old Bulls. Got the bloody Bulls on my mind over here. The Blues of Auckland taking on the Chiefs of Waikato. Competition that used to so enthrall and continues to. However, I've missed basically all of it this season because I'm always traveling on a Saturday morning as well. Always forgetting about the Friday morning games and only realizing that the game is about to end when you open up your WhatsApp and realize that your rugby group has been talking about the game for the last 70 minutes, saying how very exciting it's been. So, missing out on the rise of new Australian and New Zealand talent, as I understand. It's been another year of suffering and pain for Australia. Cannot wait for that Australian documentary about their World Cup journey. The New Zealand one, no need. You know, I've seen conversations being had, and I hope those conversations went well. They need to talk it through, discuss, you know, and as George Gregan said, 4 more years, boys, 4 more years. But Australia, now, that is must-see TV. That is a story for the centuries. It's going to be sensational business. Eddie Jones coming in. I think he left with a 22% winning record in the end. Floating in as a savior of Australian rugby. Dave Rennie, bang! Kick to the side. Thanks a lot for all you've done, but you won't be taking us to the World Cup. Eddie's got a plan. Bing, bang, bong. Eddie took them to the most heinous performance ever seen by Australia at the World Cup. Had former stars who should have been current stars saying it didn't have to be like this. Was that Bernard Foley who said that? It's going to be beautiful. See, he's done an interview, I think, with Big Jim recently. Would like to watch that, but don't want any spoilers for what I'm assuming is going to be an absolutely blockbuster production about how Australia imploded at this World Cup. Now, as a rugby fan, difficult to dance on their grave, and one shouldn't be dancing on the grave of Australian rugby because we don't have that many participants in international rugby at that very highest level. We need everybody to stay together, stay strong. That's why I support Wales in all that they do. And I hope they don't win this weekend, but I hope they put in a good performance because we need Wales strong. We need Scotland to rise the same way that Ireland has risen. If you asked me 15 years ago, wow, I'm an old man. If you asked me 10 years ago, let's go for that. 10 years ago. Yep. If you asked me 10 years ago, do you think that you'll ever have any feeling of resentment towards the Irish international rugby side? I would have laughed at that outright. Like, nah, Ireland are great. Great opposition. We play them all the time. We beat them all the time. You know, I mean, had we lost to them at that point, probably we've managed to lose one abhorrent game all the way along our up and down history of quality in South African rugby because we have very short but very extreme periods in which we lack quality, historically speaking. So it's very important to sing while you're winning. And boy, are we winning right now. Winning like we've never won before, especially at the times that matter. So, you know, during those times, you'd think pretty much anybody that plays against us can beat us. And indeed, yes, Ireland, I'm just remembering the body era, really. That was my favourite player for some time, Brian O'Driscoll. Reminiscing on times gone by. The point being, Ireland were terrible in terms of actually being a decent quality rugby side. It's not like you thought, oh, we're going to get to the World Cup. Oh, we've got Ireland. Ooh, man, that's going to be tough. But now you do think that. However, that being said, whoever does think that should remember they have never progressed past the quarterfinal. My apologies, but facts are facts. And when you've won the Rugby World Cup 4 times over, it is your responsibility to deliver those facts to anybody who may question. And now Ireland are coming and they're talking a lot of that hot stuff, you know, saying a lot of things like they should have been the team that won the World Cup. They beat us. And they should have gone on to win the World Cup. How can they beat us? We win the World Cup and they not be deserving winners? Because you gotta win the thing. The knockout stages of the World Cup really take on a different complexion because your body has been battered not only throughout your season, not only throughout your career, but in that competition itself. Even if you rest for a few matches, you know that you've been through one or two battles coming into those knockout stages. And when you hit the knockout stages, it's battle after battle after battle. And South African rugby is battle-hardened. South African rugby players are the hardest in the world. And we know that because they've won back-to-back. Anyway, okay, let us stop celebrating. Get back to the point. Back to the point. Okay, Super Rugby. First things first on Saturday morning, kicking things off. Early afternoon, Springboks taking on Wales. Late afternoon, the final of the URC, the Bulls against Glasgow Warriors. It is a Saturday of rugby that you simply cannot miss. Make sure you get everyone out of the house that needs to be out of the house, or get yourself out of there to a place where you can enjoy it in peace and harmony. It's going to be brilliant. The international window is coming. The rugby never stops, but this is the pinnacle right now of the season. So don't miss out a single second. The URC wraps up this weekend, the final match in this long